Hey there, welcome to dotnetFlix. So we talk about many different Azure services on the show, and when you use these services in your organization, it's so important to have a good governance process so that you make sure that you only run those instances that you actually need. But there are also some other very clever ways to keep the costs down, and here to talk about it with us is Michaël Hompus. Hey there, Michaël, welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're pleased to have you back on the show.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the things we can do to make that Azure Bill look a little bit friendlier?
Well, nice thing. One of the things you can do is even upgrade your resources to the latest and greatest. So
Mm,
not only getting more performance, but also getting your bill down.
cool.
A double win situation.
Yes, but
That's
you have
nice.
to know that it's there.
Okay, so tell me more.
Sure. Um, let's show you some slides. And the Dutch are famous for trying to keep their money in the pocket and not spending it. So let's dive in today how we can keep the money to ourselves and not give it to Microsoft. So I have some prices going in this sessions, and yeah, they are indication only, just to make you aware. Prices change all the time, regional differences, so they are only for indications. Um, and I'll dive into the first. We are spending money, but how much are we spending? So that's where first we are going to look at some monitoring, what we can do and what's there. Um, like I said, you can upgrade your resources to save money. So I'll dive into that. And maybe a feature not everybody is aware of is that you can also reserve resources, and that's also will bring the price down. And I'll show a bit about that. So first, start monitoring your expenses. Um, and when you enter your Azure subscription, then in the portal, the first thing you can do is just click on your subscription, because I think a lot of people also forget to click on subscription. So this is my example. I don't have a huge amount of money going through my account, but for illustration purposes, it works nicely. This is just my subscription page in the Azure portal, and there's already a diagram showing how much I've spent this period, and also makes a nice forecast. So in this case, I have to shut something down, otherwise I go over my budget. And the most important things for today are here under cost management. So analysis, alerting, budgets, and recommendations. And to get more detail about your resources and your spending, you can just click the details and then wait for the portal to load. And then we get some insights in more detail. So for this account, I can see how the costs are separated over services. So I immediately can see virtual machines, that's where I spend most of my money, then on app services, then on VPN gateways, and so on and so forth. I can also see where my resources are located, how I group them in resource groups, but you can look at many things. And also very interesting, you can group them on tags. So if you're, and not like my account, that's very small, have a bigger organization where you have departments, where you have multiple applications, you can add tags to those resources or those resource groups. And then also you can get insights on those details. So you can group them by department or by type of application, and you can really see if the investment in Azure resources relates to what you get out of it. So first of all, just click on subscription. You'll get nice insights in your spending at that moment in time. And like I showed you, really drill down into those details. So don't forget to click on that biggest bar and really look where your money is going. So now you know a little bit about where you're spending your money. And like I said, by adding tags, you can get more insights, group the cost together, split cost over multiple organizational units or maybe applications. If you want a little bit more guidance, and you want to force it a little bit, you can add Azure policies. So if you're interested in that, you can activate that in your subscription as well. And if your account is a little bit bigger and only clicking through the portal doesn't provide enough information, Microsoft provides some nice possibilities with Power BI using the Azure Cost Management endpoint. So you can directly tie into that. And there's even complete cost management app available on App Source. So that could be a quick starting point to get insights. And one challenge might be not to get owned by your own bill. And for this, I have to thank Troy Hunt for making this mistake. And he wrote a nice article about it very recently. And basically, his costs over the month went like this. And because he didn't have any cost management or alerting in place, he only discovered this when the bill came in. So my suggestion, add cost alerts. So not only just for hey, you don't know every possible thing that can go wrong, but maybe set some budget, set some alerts like if my budget is about 50% or 90%, just send me an email. At least you know upfront that something is going wrong, and you can act earlier than only when the money is already retrieved from your credit card or your account. And the last thing I would suggest is also look at the advisor recommendations. You get them for free. You don't have to pay anything for this service. And this is an example I got myself. Microsoft detected I had a public IP address that was not connected to anything, and basically alerted me like, okay, if you don't fix this, it will cost you 30 euros per year. Well, not the biggest amount of money, but in the end, I can still do other things with that money. And they even allowed me to click on the quick fix and basically remove the resource. So at least these kinds of recommendations can be very interesting. And if your account is a little bit bigger, have a little bit more resources in it, there might be alerts like your virtual machine is probably too big because you're not using any CPU on it, or things like that. You have something in place that doesn't fit with how you're using it. So like I promised, upgrading resources to save money. Let's start with a very small example. If you run Azure for a long time, you probably have a very stable virtual machine. Nothing goes wrong with it. You keep it up to date with the Windows updates. So why would you do anything else with it? Well, the longer you're running with a virtual machine, probably the more money you can save. So this is an example, a D3, a very early model of service you could utilize. It has 4 CPUs, 14 gigabytes of memory, a 200 gigabyte temp disk, and you're paying 388 euros per month. So it does what it needs to do. So maybe you think you're paying what it's worth. But if you look a little bit further, you also see that there's a V2 version of this virtual machine, and it saves you about 30 euros, 40 euros per month by just using a V2 instead of basically the V1. And then, of course, the next logical step would be to look if there's a D3 V3, but there isn't. Apparently, numbering has changed, but you could go for a D4 for V3. And same amount of CPUs, but it even provides you with 2 gigabytes more of memory. However, the temp disk is slightly smaller, but also the price. And in this case, we're already saving quite a lot per month. Well, we are Dutch, so we're going to look a little bit further. Are there more options? Well, after the V3, there's also a V4 and a V5. But The biggest difference is those don't have any temp disk available anymore. Saves you about €6, but if your application or your workload is really reliant on a temp disk, this might be an issue for you. Of course, you can mount any virtual hard disk if you want, but depends on your use case. So we want to save money and still have a temp disk. Then there's the D4A. So here we get a lot of more letters added to the naming, but the A stands for AMD. So if normally all machines use Intel, if you choose for an AMD, you can still have a temp disk and save those €6. So then the latest step, of course, is can it be more cheap? Yes, it can. We add another letter, the S. Still, or for this version, no temp disk. Also an AMD CPU, even the possibility to use premium storage, but it's only €257 per month. So if we put that in a table to compare it a little bit better, I had that first machine running for years nicely, basically costing me €4,600 every year. By just using the V2 version, I already can save 10%, small amount on a year, but putting the others alongside it, I already see that I can save €1,600 per year for only one virtual machine, just by upgrading it to the latest and greatest. So, of course, there is a small chance that the workload you're running will have impact when you use Intel or an AMD processor. So you have to check for that. If you choose the versions without a temp disk, you might need to move the Windows page file that's by default on that temp disk. So there's an instruction for that. And if you want to do this for skill sets, yeah, that can be a little bit more challenging. So that's a warning. If you use skill sets like AKS or Service Fabric, this might not be for you. But at least for all other virtual machines, it might be worth to look if you can upgrade and save money. This doesn't apply to virtual machines alone. For app services, basically the same. So maybe in the past you used a P1 where you have slightly less than 2 gigabytes of memory. And maybe this was not performing good enough for you, so you rather use the P2. And it's running for years nicely, no problem. 3.5 gigabytes of memory. You already see an A series compute, so basically a very old version. It's costing you €370 a month. If you look a little bit further, you see there's also a P2 V2. And it has double the specs, but a way lower amount of euros per month. So we're going from 370 to about €84 per month. But I don't need those specs because it was running fine with 200 ACU. So we can even go one tier lower, have all about the same specs, and only run for €40 per month.
Wow, that's a huge saving.
Yeah, that's really a big difference. And of course, if we see such a difference on the lower side, of course, I also want to look at what's the top side. So the P3 V3, that's the highest possibility you can get, which has 32 gigabytes of memory, 8 CPUs, still is costs you less per month than the old P2 edition. So even if you want to save but go to the most beefy version of your app service, still then you are saving money.
Michaël?
So also here, yes?
If you say upgrading your app service, right, is that something that you can do while the service is still running, or do you need to tear the first one down and then create a new one with the new spec?
Oh, I love this to answer this. It depends.
Nice.
As usual. I come back to that after this comparison, but yes,
Okay.
there are sometimes things you have to look for. So I'll point those out.
Okay.
So here I also picked the P2. We are paying 4,400 euros per year. And with the same specs, same memory amount, probably even a better CPU, but yeah, that's hard to compare. We are saving 90%. So this, if this is your goal, you're done. You save a lot of money. You can run other things that are nice. But if we are saving, we can also look at, can we then have more beefier app services? Maybe combine multiple app services together, because now you have to compute. So double it. We are still only on 23% of the original amount. For the same amount of money, I can even squeeze in another gigabyte of memory if I go to the P1 V3. And if I look at the P2 family, even with 16 gigabytes of memory, I only have 2,000 euros per year, which is still less than half of the original amount I was paying. So also here for app services, it can really pay off to just look at those other plans. And like you already said, Edwin, there might be issues or where you just can't switch between every tier seamlessly. And that's probably due to how the data center is where your application is running might not have the same or the other tier in the same location. And you can see it in the portal. If you can click on resize your app service plan, then the different buttons might be grayed out and also show you a message like, to switch to maybe V3, you really need to redeploy your application again. So that is not the nicest way to resize, of course. It also here it depends on which time in the past you started using that app service. If you did it more recently, then most of the time you can seamlessly change these tiers. And also sometimes you get a warning, and that's not only for going from V1 to VT2 or to V3, but also here it depends on where you are running your site at the moment, that it will give you a warning that the outbound IP addresses might change. For most websites, that's not a problem. If you do DNS right, it will pick it up automatically, but it might be impactful. So I at least want to warn you for that. So that's about upgrading and saving money. What if we already did this and we know we are going to run something for more than a year? Then we can save money in a different way. And that's by reserving resources. So reserving resources, like I said, you should basically know that you're running for more than a year, because the reservation is for 1 or 3 years. And on average, for 1 year, you get about a 40% discount on the resource. It can be 30%, can be 50%. It really depends on the type of resource, the region, things like that. For 3 years, you get even a more beefy discount, 60%. But then again, you need to be sure that you are going to use the resource for 3 years, because if you don't use the resource in a period of time, like a month, you don't get that for the next month. So you can't use that money any later in time. So I would advise to be on the safe side, but 30% is still a nice amount of money to save. And then you get the question, do you want to optimize for instance size flexibility? And I had to read up on this because I didn't understand what they're saying. And this is one of those things that, well, it's not really documented that prominent. VM instance size flexibility groups is basically just a CSV you can download on the portal or in docs.microsoft.com. But what it means is if you have a DSV2 virtual machine, you can do a reservation for a specific size. So let's say a DS1, that's what you want. then Microsoft will make sure that hardware is reserved for you, only that size in the region you want for the period you have the reservation, if you use it or not. But if you want to have more flexibility, because maybe your DS1 is fine for a couple of months, but after that you want to have a more beefier machine, you need twice the resources, then that reservation would not fit for the DS2. And that's where the flexibility group comes in. If you enable that option, any size within this family, within the DSV2 series, if it's a DS1 or DS5, falls in the same reservation. But say you have reserved a DS5 V2, then that has a ratio of 16:1 if you would have a DS1.
So do you then also get a lower discount if you select that option?
I
To
didn't
have that
see.
flexibility?
Yeah, I didn't see any mentioning of that, but that also impacts that. It is more like if you have this flexibility, then there's no guarantee that Microsoft will also have that machine for you available.
Right.
This is really in the extreme situation where you probably create virtual machines on the for very short bursts of time, because normally if your virtual machine is on for a year, yeah, then there's nothing to reserve because the machine is already on. But that specific reservation for one type of sizing is really like, I want to be able to switch on that machine any point of time, no matter the current demand in that data center. So that's basically you're buying for that assurance that that machine will always be there if you want to switch it on.
Right.
And I have also a small example. So maybe I reserve a DS5, then I can also run, of course, a DS5, but I can also run 16 DS1s for the same amount of money. I can run 4 DS3s, I can run 4 DS2s and 1 DS4. As long as the sum of all the machines count to what I've reserved, then I won't have to pay any other pay-as-you-go rate. So I have an example how reservations had an impact on the cost of a certain subscription. This was basically a nice trend. If I put a line on it, basically on the end of the month, I would end at a certain height. We activated reservations for the subscription. So basically I have a monthly payment for that reservation. But interestingly enough, after that reservation was active, you see a different rate. And if I also put a line on that, even though we started on January the 18th, by the end of the month, we were already breaking even for cost of virtual machines. So that means the next month, basically 18 days, we would save money. So this is showing that it can be very impactful on your subscription to reserve instances at virtual machines. This is not only for virtual machines. Reservations are all over the place in Azure these days, for storage, databases, network, I think, as well, but also other things than just only virtual machines. What do you have to consider? Well, not every subscription supports reservations. So if you, like me, have an MSDN-like Azure subscription, you can put any reservation in it. But do you have an enterprise agreement or CSP? Those kinds of subscriptions, they all support it. A reservation, you can do that on a specific subscription, but you can also do it on a higher level. If you have multiple subscriptions in your company, you can put also reservations on a management group or marking them shared, so that if in your subscription you don't use a virtual machine at a point in time, maybe in another subscription you use the same size, you can at least utilize your subscription or your reservation to the max. And you can also use reservations for app services, but they need to be for the third generation. So that's at least something to be aware about. Other than that, like app services, most of the time you run them year round because it's your website, your public API. this would be a very good consideration to do. So to conclude, my advice to you is check your expenses. Make sure you know what you're putting your money to. Add alerts, because that might be very interesting to get a heads up before things go in the wrong way. Like I've shown you, upgrade your resources to the most recent offerings, because then you can already save money and utilize your resources better, do nicer things. Look at those recommendations. They are free and they can be very useful. And like I said, anything that runs over a year, consider using reservations, because it will save you money.
Yeah, cool. That's a really nice overview, Michaël.
Welcome. I hope for some people it will make some impact on their bill.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we all run things in Azure, right? Because we have ours, like you said, you have your MSDN subscription, but we also do a lot of stuff for customers. And I think that we need to really be aware that there are lots of ways to run things in Azure and make it as cheap as possible. You actually have to put some effort in there. And but I think that the toolings that Microsoft provides for you in Azure, like these charts that you have, it's all basically baked into your subscription. You don't have to enable anything or pay for those graphs. Of course, it's all in there. So just use them. They're there, and try to get acquainted with how they work and how to read them. And then I think you can get most out of your Azure subscription. And one thing that I was wondering, if you start creating a new machine, right, in the portal, for instance, you're just clicking around and you have to select a machine type. Does it always show you the cheapest options, or is that something that you really have to dive into? Because I always see that you have some favorites. You also can show more and show a bigger list of machines. Is that always something that you want to do, or do you already get the cheapest options available?
No, indeed, those recommendations are not based on price. So it already pays to do some research at the beginning. And the nice thing of these of virtual machines, for example, is that you can basically switch anytime in size. Of course, your machine has to reboot. So if you have a 24/7 application, it's not the best way to resize. But most of the time, you can just switch around. So even if you come to the conclusion, my machine is underutilized, I bought too many CPUs or too much memory, I don't use any of it, switch to a lower version. That's not that's not a problem.
Yeah. And of course, these reservations, right? But usually we build applications that run for years in production. So reservations can really help you to lower your Azure bill. So that's a nice step.
And that's also why measuring is very important. Also, of course, when you start a project, when you start something, you maybe are not knowing exactly how much do I need, how long will it run, or how heavy will it be used. So also look just at those graphs that are available to get an insight, and then maybe after a couple of months, or maybe you wait the first year to get really a feeling for it, but really start using those tools to cut unnecessary costs.
Yeah, and maybe even work, like you said, with budgets and alerts, so you know upfront when you are spending too much or more than you envisioned when you started out. So I think those are great helps for you.
Yep.
So
it's also possible to reassign those credits to a different machine, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm running a VM and I've made a reservation, but I don't longer need it anymore, I can spin up a similar machine, same size, and apply the credits to that one.
Yeah, that's also my suggestion, to make those reservations at the highest level possible. Of course, if you have an organization where every department has their own financial responsibilities and they are not allowed to share things, okay, then that's different. But my suggestion to put it as high as possible, because then you can share it the most. If you really have an issue that you can't or are not using anything of a reservation anymore, then there are some possibilities with Microsoft that they can return it to some budget that you can use for other services, but it comes at a cost. You pay, and it's up to Microsoft if they will be lenient towards your converting your reservation.
Really kindly.
Yes.
So it's basically like store credit, right? That you get.
Yeah, indeed. You can only use it for other Azure services, so you won't
No.
get your money in cash back. No.
Well, that makes sense if you're Microsoft, so I understand that. So,
Yep.
Okay. Thanks so much for sharing this with us. I thought it was a really a good overview. I hope you guys at home also liked it. If you like dotnetFlix, of course, subscribe to the channel and click on the like button. And we hope to see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.